Responsible physicality. The Minnesota Wild are playing with it, and today on Locked On Wild, I'm going to tell you exactly what that means.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild, we are going to talk about responsible physicality. The Minnesota Wild are playing with it, and that is a huge reason as to why they were able to win Game 2. And they try now tonight to take a 2-1 lead in the best-of-7 series. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, credentialed media member, and gearing up for Game 3 tonight at the Xcel Energy Center. Should be a raucous crowd tonight. We'll talk about it at the end of the show today, but no line changes. No lineup changes at all for this one tonight. So it'll be interesting to see what the difference looks like now that John Hynes has the ability to dictate the matchups. But it will be the same lineup that we've seen over at least for Game 2. So the Wild, I was thinking about this earlier today in gearing up for this game tonight. It has been a hot minute since the Minnesota Wild had a game in which they did not commit a penalty. And not only did they not commit a penalty, I don't recall many, if any, plays that were even penalty worthy in the game against the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't any, because we all know when you watch on TV, you get part of the overall view of the ice. So that's not to say that there were no plays that could have been called as a penalty. It's just we didn't see anything on television that looked like it. And in Game 1, the Wild committed one penalty. I'm not counting the one that Matt Boldy had to take in order to prevent an empty net goal. I'm not counting that one because that was basically at the end of the game. So it's not a penalty that factored into the grand scheme of things. I know Vegas did score on that power play, but really, for all intents and purposes, committed one penalty, the Joel Eriksson high stick, in Game 1. So through 2 games, this Wild team has done a very good job of limiting Vegas's opportunities to get anything done on the power play. They scored on 2 attempts in Game 1. Yeah. Like I said, I don't really count that second one because that happened essentially at the end of the game, and no opportunities for Vegas in the second game. And if we just go back to what we saw in the postseason, let's go back to 2022-2023 against the Dallas Stars. The Wild had 121 penalty minutes in the 6 games. And if you boil down those games in particular, there were a lot of instances in which there were frustration penalties, there were physical, roughing, charging, different penalties along those lines that led to the Wilds kind of losing their cool in that series against the Dallas Stars. They were up 2-1 in that series and just lost their edge. You've got Ryan Hartman interference penalty in the final game of that series against Dallas. You got a Matt Boldy cross check. If we go back to Game 5 of that Dallas series, You have just an insane amount of penalties. You got a kneeing penalty. Marcus Foligno was assessed a game misconduct and ended up leaving that game 2 minutes in. Jake Middleton cross-checking. Matt Dunbar roughing. Ryan Hartman roughing. Matt Boldy cross-checking. You've got a lot of frustration-type penalties that the Wild took as that series went along. Ryan Hartman picking up a misconduct penalty in Game 4 of the series. A lot of frustration penalties that the team picked up as the series went along, which just kept giving Dallas opportunities to go on the power play and just continue to build and maintain their lead. And we have not seen that from the Minnesota Wild so far this year. There have been plays that should have been called that weren't, but we haven't seen the Minnesota Wild frustrated by that this year as much. I know it's only 2 games in. A lot can change even in the course of this series. But I think we're seeing this Minnesota Wild team do what we have been clamoring for over the last couple of years, which is to not let anything of that nature affect their play on the ice. Joel Eriksson Ek gets Ryan Hartman actually gets cross-checked in the face, goes down on the ice, bleeding. Where the heck's the call? Everybody wondering what's going on with the call. No retaliation. That could have gotten very ugly had Hartman gotten frustrated to the point that he retaliated. And then in that instance, you're the one that takes the penalty. That's just how it works. It's not who started it. By and large, it's who ends it. And with as much as the officials have let both sides play so far in these first 2 games, kudos to the Minnesota Wild for not losing their cool, because especially in that series against Dallas, it felt like the Stars got that into the heads of the Minnesota Wild very early on in that series, and they just were never able to recover from it. The Wild weren't. They got frustrated. Every time there was a penalty called, it was like, oh, here we go again. And it boiled over very early on in the series. And the water just continued to bubble over, and Dallas just every time they got put on the power play, they just continued to step in and continue to cash in those regards. I'll put it this way. The Wild in their 6 games had almost as many penalties as the Seattle Kraken, almost as many penalty minutes as the Kraken did in 8 fewer games. 121 penalty minutes. The Kraken had 132 in 14 games in 2022-2023. And the Kraken played 14 games. The Wild played 6. So there just was a lot of frustration. And the penalty kill, 62.5%. If you're going to go into the postseason with a suspect penalty kill, you really can't afford to have it be tested as much as the Minnesota Wilds has been the last 2 postseasons before this one. And the penalty kill this year, the results have not been great. But the team has found a way to keep the physicality going without having to worry about overexerting the penalty kill. And I'm calling that responsible physicality. Marcus Foligno has just been all over the ice, throwing the body like nobody's business, but has not yet been called for a penalty. Yakov Trenyan has a ton of hits so far for the Minnesota Wild in this postseason, has not yet been called for a penalty. And some of that is the officials allowing the players to play. But my hope is that's a little bit of a maturation for this Minnesota Wild team with what has happened over the last couple of years. I know there was some annoyance at what happened in that game 1 especially on the Hartman cross check. But it seemed like the team very quickly moved on and turned the page, something that they didn't seem like they were able to do in that series against Dallas. Didn't feel like they were able to turn the page when things did not go their way. So a maturation process for this Wild team, the ability for them to still, because they have been throwing their body weight around. And I'm not talking solely the hits, which hits are not a great indicator because a hit can mean many different things. It has been, the physicality is applied to many other areas that have been critical as well. Knocking a Vegas player off the puck, moving the Vegas player out of the way of a puck to intercept it yourself. Think about how key those turnovers were in game 2, especially on Shea Theodore. The Wild's simply moving Vegas players off the puck, taking it from them, just stepping in and going and getting a puck. I count that as physicality as well. It's all encompassing. And the Wild have done a great job in this series. They did this in game 1 too, even though they came up on the losing end, of asserting themselves without having to worry about going overboard. And Ryan Hartman may be the face of that, because in his elevated minutes, he started the series on the 4th line, very quickly elevated himself to the 3rd line and has mixed in up and down the lineup. And it's pretty clear that Hartman has been able to do his thing without going over that line. So when we come back, we're going to talk about how Ryan Hartman has asserted himself into this series early on by doing his thing, but not crossing that line. And everydayers know exactly the line that I'm talking about. So we'll dive into how Ryan Hartman has elevated himself, but kept himself in control. That's coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. FanDuel makes it incredibly easy to track your bets, whether you want to make a long-term play throughout the course of a season, or if you want to bet live, second half over, third quarter under. No matter what you want to do, FanDuel makes the option so easy to find and so easy to keep up with during the game. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. We will have a post game for you tonight, as this is going to be a much earlier start compared to the rest of the week. And then, of course, we'll have an episode coming up for you tomorrow as well to gear us up for Game 4 on Saturday. So make sure to like and subscribe if you have not already, so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the rest of the series. Let's talk about Ryan Hartman a little bit, because Ryan Hartman quickly played himself off the 4th line in Game 1. He elevated almost immediately. John Hynes talked about it after Game 1, heading into Game 2, that Hartman was a player that certainly was worthy of getting an elevated role. And Ryan Hartman is a player that he's an important piece of what this Minnesota Wild team does. And it depends entirely on kind of where he's at in his process. Because we have talked about this with many guests over the course of his tenure with the Minnesota Wild. Ryan Hartman is a player that likes to play on edge. He likes to try to ruffle feathers on the other side of the ice. And there is a certain line in the sand that he can get up to. It's like a dog fence. You walk right up to it, and as long as you don't cross it, you can do whatever you want. But when you cross into kind of that uncharted territory, then things, all bets are off. We saw it in the postseason series against Dallas. We saw it during the regular season this year. The Tim Stützle suspension after the game against the Ottawa Senators. Hartman has certainly had no shortage of boil-over points. Think about a couple of years ago. Hartman got pulled from the lineup because the penalty minutes were getting just out of control to the point that he was basically playing himself off the ice. And so there's this very fine line that Hartman can operate within. And if he operates within those parameters, he usually does a good job. He was the center for both of Matt Boldy's goals in game one, just based off of kind of players coming onto the ice, players coming off the ice. He ended up actually being the center as opposed to Joel Eriksson-Ek for those two goals. So he was pivotal in Matt Boldy scoring a couple of times in game one. He assisted on a goal, the Marcus Foligno goal in game two, because he was able to win a physical battle behind the net, take control of the puck, and he had a nifty feed to Foligno, who just tapped it in right on the doorstep. So when Hartman is going and he's able to kind of straddle the fence, he brings a needed commodity to this team, because Hartman has never been shy about shooting the puck. The accuracy is not always the best, but he is somebody that can, I think, be an offensive weapon for this team that can also give you some pitbull level physical play and some defensive aspects as well. It's going to be interesting to see what happens here in game three, because Hartman, he's going to operate on that third line once again. But if he continues to elevate, if he continues to play well, I kind of wonder if you're not going to elevate Marco Rossi right now, I kind of wonder if Ryan Hartman maybe flips with Freddie Gaudreau. And I have no problem if he continues to bring good energy, good push, good fight, then he should get moved higher up in the lineup. But as of right now, you look at players that kind of needed to step up after slower seasons, and we can certainly say that Hartman had a bit of a slow season during the regular season. He has stepped it up considerably here through the first two games of the postseason. That's why the Minnesota Wild were able to earn the split against Vegas in Vegas. Was you get the contributions you expect from Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy, but you get other players to step up. You get other role players to step up and provide services and provide a role, as opposed to just throwing it all on two guys. Will it continue tonight? That remains to be seen, because I am of the belief that we're going to get a pretty heavy push from the Vegas Golden Knights in tonight's matchup. Will the Wild be able to weather that storm? Will the Wild be able to get the crowd into it early? A home game in the Stanley Cup playoffs. What could be better? Well, turns out the Wild did not have the greatest of seasons at home. We'll look at how the Wild can give the fans something to cheer about right off the drop as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Monarch makes it so easy to track all my different expenditures. There are a lot of transactions that a person has over the course of a day, a week, a month. And Monarch makes it so easy to key in on particular items so that I can make sure, hey, is this something worthwhile? Is this something I'm getting benefit from? Or am I just throwing my money away? Monarch makes it so easy. Their detailed breakdowns of every cent you spend makes it so easy to get everything in order. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, we will have a post game for you after the game tonight. We'll keep you updated on what's going on Saturday. I will be out of town on Saturday, so probably will not be able to get you a postcast immediately after. We'll see if we can squeeze one in when I get back. But if not, we'll have Denny's latest show on Sunday coming up for you to break down all of the action. So either way, we got you covered. We will have you covered tonight, and we'll get you the firmed up, ironed out plan on tomorrow's show as well. No lineup changes for the Minnesota Wild heading into Game 3. Is that a mistake? Is that John Hynes saying, I don't feel the need to shuffle things around after a Game 2 win? Here's what I'd like to say before we dive into the particulars. I understand the notion of we just got to win. Don't feel the need to make changes just for the sake of making changes. And that's fine. I mean, the Wild had 3 different lines contribute goals in this game. If that type of depth scoring continues, then that's what this team needs to get in this postseason. But if it does not, then you are going to need to take a look at your formula and what it's getting you on a nightly basis. We've seen plenty of examples over the last 2 postseasons before this one of the Minnesota Wild getting themselves to a 2-1 advantage and resting on their heels, resting on their laurels, celebrating their achievements. This isn't so hard. This isn't that bad. We can win this series. And in both cases, the opposing coach, Craig Berube and Pete DeBoer, they lit their lineup card on fire and went with their gut. They went with their gut. They went with what they thought was going to get them a win in every single scenario. Every line, every change. They said, I'm going to go with feel for the game, how things are flowing, and we're going to do whatever we need to do in order to come away with wins. And the Minnesota Wild, they stuck to their guns. They stuck to their formula, and they said, we're just going to keep beating you. Now, I know that was a pretty solid stance by Dean Evison, former Minnesota Wild coach, that this is my system. We're going to beat you. If you beat us, we're going to tip our cap. We're going to get right back to work the next game. And while I am concerned that, Vegas now is in position to where they have to fight. They got to fight. They have to fight and claw and scratch for every inch. We just had a game a couple weeks ago against Calgary. Calgary was fighting and clawing and desperate to pick up points. And what we heard after the game was we couldn't match the desperation. We couldn't, We weren't as desperate as Calgary was. We weren't ready at the drop. I worry majorly because it is proven, it's a proven thing from previous postseason experiences. I worry about this team's ability to handle success. Now, this year, through the first 2 games, the ability to wipe away game 1 and flip the page to game 2, that is different. That's different from what we've seen from this Minnesota Wild team. So that is a step in the right direction. I will also say, I don't think just because the lineup has stayed the same, I don't think we're going to get the same thing from John Hynes that we got from Dean Evison, where he just keeps rolling out the same combinations of lines. John Hynes is going to plug and play as he sees fit. So I worry about the Wild. Mike Zimmer had the all-time quote that sank the Minnesota Vikings season the year that they started. I think they started 8-0 or 6-0, somewhere in that range. But Mike Zimmer, during the bye week, typed out the quote, "Fat cats get slaughtered." I'm gonna utter that phrase, put that phrase into the world, speak it into existence. You can't get complacent against a team like the Vegas Golden Knights. You can't get complacent against anybody in the postseason, but especially against a team like the Vegas Golden Knights. Through 2 games, Jack Eichel has been quiet. I don't anticipate that that's going to be the case the whole series. Through 2 games, Mark Stone has been quiet. I don't anticipate that is going to be the case through the entirety of the series. Aiden Hill had a rough game in game 2. But unless you attack him in the same way that the Minnesota Wild did in game 2, he's going to bounce back. And you can't count on having all of your goals handed to you on a golden platter. Not dismissing the way the Wild played, because they had the urgency. They took momentum from Vegas early on in game 2, and they used it to build up a 3-0 lead, then tack on a 4th in the second period to make it 4-0 at that point. But as much as that game was them seizing the moment, capitalizing on mistakes, there's also the 35-plus minutes at the end of the game that looked like a penalty kill. Nothing in the postseason is easy. Nothing is easy. It is all earned. None of it is given. So for the Minnesota Wild, a little pep talk here to get us ready for game 3. The crowd is going to be ready to go tonight from the get-go. The crowd is going to be ready to go. It's a later than 8 p.m. puck drop. So fans have already dialed in. They're ready to rock. The Wild need to, early on in the game tonight, give them a reason to cheer, whether that be a goal, whether that be a heavy hit. There are many different ways that you can get your crowd involved. Get your fans loud early on. Great saves by Philip Gustafsson. Give the fans a reason to get up off their seats and scream their lungs out through the entirety of the game and feed off of that energy and go punch Vegas right in the mouth. Because if the Wilds play this game the way they did, the complete game is in there between what they did in game 1 when they came up just short and what they did in game 2 where they won 5-2. You combine those 2 games together, and you've got yourself a pretty good formula for how to beat this Vegas Golden Knights team. The problem is to just avoid the slow start. That's the one thing you can't afford to do in this series, at home, in this game. You have to find a way to manufacture the excitement and the energy right off the drop. And once the fans get going, they'll blow the roof off the Xcel Energy Center. And Vegas will, after the game, we'll be hearing Vegas players say, this is one of the loudest environments you'll ever see. The crowd They fed off the crowd, and that gave them energy to come away with the win here tonight. So give them everything they can handle, but don't take them lightly. Do not take the Vegas Golden Knights lightly in this game. They are going to come back with a vengeance, and if you are not ready for that pushback, you're going to look up at the scoreboard, and it's going to be 3-0 Golden Knights before you can blink. So, responsible physicality. Throw the body around, but act within the confines of what's going on during the game, and don't let frustration boil over. If you do that, you're going to be in good shape here tonight. That's our show for today. Appreciate everybody tuning in as you do each and every day of the week. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.